The children sold their elderly mother's house, divided the inheritance, and sent her to spend her final days in a nursing home. 3 years passed without visiting her. When they finally decided to return, what they found was completely unexpected. The mother they had left behind, frail and broken, was now transformed. What had happened during that time? But before starting this emotional story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of our stories full of lessons and heart-touching moments. Doña Helena, a woman with gray hair and tired eyes, had always been strong. For years, she raised her 3 children almost alone after the early loss of her husband. She took pride in giving everything she had to ensure they received a good education and opportunities in life. Her house, simple but cozy, was always the home where the family's most important memories were made. Christmases around the table, birthdays full of laughter and stories. Life had passed, and her children were now adults, busy with their own responsibilities, careers, and families. The time to visit their mother became increasingly rare. However, in recent months, Doña Helena began to show signs of fatigue. Her steps, once firm, were now slower and more cautious. She tired quickly from small tasks like watering the garden plants or climbing the stairs to her room. Her body was no longer the same, and the loneliness of the big, silent house weighed more than ever. Her children, though they loved her, didn't notice these signs closely. Their lives were so busy that visits became even rarer. They were quick phone calls, promises of meetings that were rarely kept. But one day, the situation reached a point where it could no longer be ignored. One of the sons, after a long time without visiting, noticed the exhaustion in his mother's eyes and how she struggled to move around the house. That's when they decided to gather. It was time to discuss Doña Helena's future. Everyone agreed she could no longer live alone in such a big house. Concerns were expressed, and the conversation, which began hesitantly, quickly took a practical turn. None of the children felt capable of caring for her full time. Each was immersed in their own life. One lived far away, another had a job that took up almost all their time, and the third, with young children, didn't know how to juggle everything. After a long debate, they concluded that the best course was to sell the house where Doña Helena had lived for so many years. "She'll be better off in a nursing home," suggested one of the children, convincing themselves it was the right decision. "There, she'll have medical care, won't be alone, and we can visit her when we can." The words seemed reasonable to them, thinking they were doing what was best for their mother. So they decided that the money from the house's sale would be divided among them. After all, it seemed fair, given that each had their own financial commitments. And thus, believing they were acting in a practical and sensible way, they settled Doña Helena's future. What they didn't know, however, was that for their mother, the meaning of that house went far beyond bricks and furniture. It was the symbol of her entire life, the home she had built with so much effort and love, the place where she watched her children grow, and where her most cherished memories were kept. And now, all of that would be left behind. With the decision made, Doña Helena's children didn't waste time. The urgency to resolve the situation was evident. Each had commitments and responsibilities, and they thought this was the most sensible solution for their mother. After all, they thought, she would be well taken care of in the nursing home, and the sale of the house would help alleviate some financial concerns each was facing. They soon began searching for a buyer. The house, which had been Doña Helena's refuge for decades, was simple but full of charm. The walls held laughter, conversations, and even some tears from difficult moments. But for the children, it was just a property. They no longer saw the memories it contained. They didn't feel the emotional weight it represented for their mother. To them, it was simply a practical matter. Sell the house, settle their mother's future, and move on with their lives. And so, in a few weeks, the house was sold. An interested buyer, attracted by the good location, quickly closed the deal. The value, which represented a considerable amount to the children, was divided equally among them. Each received their share and in a way sighed with relief. This for them was one less problem to deal with. But for Doña Helena, the feeling was entirely different. Seeing how the house where she had spent so many moments was sold so hastily was like losing a part of herself. Every corner of that house had a story. The room where she cradled her children when they were small, the kitchen where she prepared family meals on Sunday mornings, the garden which she tended with so much care. Now all of that would belong to someone else. She said nothing to her children. She didn't want to disrupt their lives or seem ungrateful. They believed they were doing what was best for her. But in her heart, a deep void began to grow. The house wasn't just a physical place, it was part of her history, her identity. And now, with the sale, it seemed like a part of her life had been erased forever. Doña Helena knew deep down that her children weren't acting out of malice. They wanted the best for her. They wanted her to be well cared for, safe, in a place where she could have assistance all the time. But at that moment, as she felt the gentle sway of the car on the road to the nursing home, the reality weighed on her soul. Every kilometer they moved away from the old house seemed to deepen the void inside her. It was as if she were leaving behind not just a place, but a part of herself. That house had been more than just a collection of walls and furniture. Every detail held a memory. The sound of her children's laughter running through the garden, the smell of fresh cornbread baking on Sunday mornings, the silent nights when she sat on the porch, watching the stars while thinking about the husband who had left too soon. How could she forget all of that? How could she start anew in a place that held none of her memories? When they arrived at the nursing home, her children helped Doña Helena out of the car with loving care, but also with a certain haste, as if relieved to have found a solution. The facade of the nursing home was nice, with flowers planted in the front garden and a sign that read, "Buena Vida Residence." But for Doña Helena, it didn't matter how well kept the place was. It could never replace the home she had left behind. As she entered, she was greeted by a smiling woman who showed her around. "You'll like it here. We have activities every day, the rooms are cozy, and all the staff are very attentive." Doña Helena listened, but the words felt distant. She tried to keep smiling, but her eyes revealed the sadness she kept deep in her soul. Her room was small, tidy, with a single bed, a chair by the window, and a wardrobe for her few clothes. Everything there felt impersonal. It didn't have the familiar smell of the old house, nor the sounds of the memories that had been part of her daily life. Sitting on the bed, Doña Helena looked out the window and saw a well-kept garden, but it wasn't hers. "This is my new home now," she thought, her heart heavy. As her children said their goodbyes with promises of regular visits, promises she knew might not be kept so often, Doña Helena felt a deep sense of loss. It wasn't just the house she had left behind, it was an entire life. All the memories, all the effort she had put into raising her children in that home, every little detail that made that place special. Now all of that was part of the past. She knew she would have to be strong, that she would have to get used to the new reality. Her children had their own lives, their own concerns. They didn't mean any harm. Deep down she understood that. But understanding didn't make things any easier. Resting her head on that unfamiliar pillow, with her heart heavy with nostalgia, made her realize that even though she was surrounded by other people, at that moment she felt more alone than ever. Change was inevitable, but accepting it would be a much harder journey. After taking Doña Helena to the nursing home, her children, who had already been somewhat distant, began to pull away even more. Before, at least they would call from time to time, make quick visits on the weekends. But now, with their mother well cared for, there didn't seem to be much need for contact. They carried on with their busy lives, filled with commitments, work projects, children to care for, and bills to pay. Weeks went by. and what had once been sporadic presence became almost total silence. Calls became rare. The visits, which had already been brief and rushed, almost ceased to exist. At first, Doña Helena still anxiously awaited the arrival of one of her children. She would dress carefully, put on her best blouse, fix her hair, and sit near the window, from where she could see the entrance to the nursing home. Maybe they'll come today, she would think. But the day would pass, the sun would set, and no one would appear. Her heart tightened a little more with each wait in vain, but even so she held on to hope. The days in the nursing home were long, very long. The hours seemed to drag on. While the other residents talked and participated in activities, Doña Helena withdrew into herself. It wasn't that she didn't try to socialize, but something inside her couldn't disconnect from the past, from the life she had before, from the children who had left her there, thinking they were doing what was best. The walls of the room, despite being bright and well maintained, had no soul. They were cold, indifferent. There were no family portraits, no memories of her children growing up, the memories that meant so much to her. All that remained was silence, a silence that, over time, became deafening. While her children continued with their frantic pace of life, work, children, travel for Doña Helena, the days were an endless repetition of loneliness. She found herself reminiscing about the times when the house was full of life, when she could hear laughter echoing through the halls, the smell of the food she cooked for the family, the conversations around the table. Now, in the nursing home, meals were silent, conversations cold. There was none of that familial warmth, that sense of belonging. She tried to distract herself with the few activities the home offered, like walks in the garden or meetings with other elderly residents. But deep down, what she really longed for was the presence of her children. She wanted to hear their voices, know how they were doing, feel that she was still important to them. Nostalgia became a constant companion, day by day. Time passed slowly, and for Doña Helena, each absence from her children felt like a weight accumulating on her shoulders. She knew they were busy, that modern life was like that, but the emptiness it left in her heart was immense. The nursing home, with all the care it offered, didn't fill the void that only the love and presence of her children could fill. The other residents seemed accustomed to it, interacting easily with each other, and although Doña Helena was a sociable woman, she felt out of place. The conversations she overheard didn't interest her. The activities suggested by the staff didn't spark her curiosity. She found herself increasingly isolated in her own world of memories. The nostalgia for her former life and the absence of her children made everything even more difficult. Often she would sit in the armchair in her room, gazing out the window, watching the movement outside as time passed slowly. However, as the weeks went by, something began to change. Little by little, Doña Helena realized that there were other people there who, like her, carried their own pains, nostalgias, and stories. It was as if, suddenly, she realized she wasn't as alone as she had thought. The curiosity and empathy that had always had a place in her heart began to awaken again. One day, during breakfast, a woman sat beside her and with a kind smile started a conversation. She talked about her life before the nursing home, about the things she liked to do. At first hesitant, Helena responded with few words, but something about that conversation moved her. From that moment on, she began to participate more. She was invited on one of the walks through the garden, something she had always loved, and though reluctant at first, she agreed. In the garden, she felt the soft wind on her face, the smell of the flowers, and something inside her calmed. There, walking with the other residents, Helena began to feel that perhaps she could find a new way to live in that place. Weeks passed, and Helena grew closer to more people. She made friends with a woman named Maria, a fun and full of life woman who shared funny stories. They laughed together, talked about life, and Helena realized how much lighter she felt, something she hadn't felt in a long time. With Maria and other friends she made, Doña Helena began to participate in activities she had previously avoided: painting classes, card games, and even music nights, where the elderly sang old songs together. She found herself involved, discovering abilities she never thought she had. Doña Helena had always had a special connection with the earth. When she still lived in her old home, she would spend hours in the yard, tending to the plants, watering flowers, and pruning the small trees she had planted over the years. It was there, surrounded by nature, that she found refuge during moments of loneliness or worry. And now, in the nursing home, though she felt lost at first, it was precisely that connection with the earth that began to rekindle something inside her. The nursing home had a large, beautiful, well-kept garden, but one that still held much potential. One day, during one of the walks she took with the other residents, Helena noticed that some flowers were starting to wilt, needing more attention. Her gardening instincts, which had been dormant, soon awoke. She approached an employee and asked if she could help care for the garden. The response came with a smile. "Of course. We'd love your help, Doña Helena." The next morning, she was already in the garden, kneeling on the ground, smelling the damp soil and feeling the leaves gently brush against her hands. That sensation brought her immediate comfort, a familiarity that made her feel at home for the first time since arriving at the home. Gradually, she became more and more involved. She began to plan small projects, suggesting new types of plants that could be grown there. The garden, which had once been just a pretty place to walk, started to transform under Doña Helena's careful touch. Over time, the garden became a gathering place for her and other nursing home residents. Many came to watch her work, some even asked for advice on how to care for their own plants. What had started as a solitary activity ended up becoming a way to connect with others. Doña Helena, once so closed off in her sadness, was now surrounded by new friendships and smiles. The plants, just like the new relationships she was building, grew strong and vibrant. Everyone at the nursing home began to admire Helena's work. The staff were amazed at how much she had transformed the space, and many of the residents found the garden a place to relax, meditate, and chat. For Helena, the garden became a sanctuary, a place where she could reflect on the past without pain, but with the peace of someone who is at ease with themselves. And so, day by day, the garden flourished, just like Doña Helena herself. Working with the plants became one of the greatest joys of her life, a source of renewal. With each new season, the garden reflected Helena's inner transformation, showing that even in difficult times, life always finds a way to bloom. Over time, something curious happened at the nursing home. Doña Helena, who initially felt so out of place and sad, began to stand out in a way no one expected. Her wisdom, the fruit of a lifetime of experiences, and her natural generosity started to catch the attention of the other residents. It wasn't long before, during small conversations by the garden or in the quiet afternoons in the living room, people began seeking her for advice or just to share their worries. She always had a kind word, an encouraging smile, or even a funny memory from her younger days to lift the spirits of those around her. Soon, Doña Helena's presence became indispensable. If someone had a problem, she was there to listen. If a new activity arose, she was the one encouraging everyone to participate. Her energy seemed to infect the atmosphere, and what once seemed like a lonely, colorless life for many of the residents now had a different glow. The days were lighter with Doña Helena's ideas, but her contribution didn't stop there. Realizing there were many things that could improve in the nursing home, she began talking with the staff, always polite but firm, suggesting changes that would make the environment more welcoming and functional. She organized a meeting between the residents and the administration, something no one had thought to do before. In that meeting, with her calm voice, Doña Helena brought up important issues: the need for more recreational activities, improvements in the food, and even the creation of small support groups where residents could share their stories and cope better with the longing for family. Little by little, her ideas were accepted. New activities began to spring up, like craft workshops, music sessions, and even a small book club where each person could read a passage from their favorite book. The staff, who once saw their work at the nursing home as an exhausting routine, started to notice the difference in the atmosphere and became more engaged with the residents. Everything there seemed to come to life, and what was once just a residence for the elderly now felt like a place where new memories were being created. Doña Helena, who at first feared the future, began to discover something she had never imagined. She wasn't just passing the days in the nursing home, waiting for time to pass. On the contrary, each new dawn was an opportunity to explore a version of herself that, in her younger years, she may never have known. At the reunion, Doña Helena walked toward her children with steady steps and a welcoming smile on her face. There wasn't a trace of resentment in her expression, but as she approached, her eyes revealed a slight sadness, as if she remembered the time spent without them nearby. Still, she opened her arms to receive them, like a mother always ready to embrace her children, no matter how much time had passed or what had happened. The children, for their part, felt a mixture of emotions seeing her so close, so different from the image they held of her. When they finally hugged her, they felt the familiar warmth, but something had changed. It was as if the mother they had left in the nursing home had transformed into someone stronger, more independent, but who still carried with her all the love she had always had for them. "My dears," Doña Helena said, her voice soft and full of tenderness. "It's so good to see you again." The children, still surprised by the warm reception, didn't quite know what to say. They had arrived with a heavy heart, prepared to face the guilt and perhaps even the resentment they expected to see in their mother's eyes. But instead, they found understanding. She didn't blame them for their absence, nor did she bring hidden accusations. Only a slight melancholy for the lost time. "How are you, Mom?" one of the children asked, trying to understand how this woman, who seemed reborn, truly felt. Helena smiled calmly and with a serene look began to tell them how she had found a new life in the nursing home. "I confess it was hard at first, very hard. I felt abandoned, alone, not knowing what to do with so much time and so few visits. But in time, I realized life was still full of opportunities, even here. I met wonderful people, made friends who brought me a lot of joy, and ended up discovering skills and passions I never imagined I had." The children listened in silence, absorbing every word. She told them about her painting classes, the gardening projects she led, and how she got involved in activities that kept her active and engaged. What impressed them most was hearing that, without depending on them, without expecting something external, Doña Helena had found happiness where she least expected it. It was as if she had discovered a new strength, a new way of living that they had never considered possible. "I learned that even without you nearby, I could be happy. And it's not because I don't miss you. I miss you a lot. But I had to find my own happiness, for myself." There was a simple and deep honesty in her words, and the children felt, at the same time, relieved and moved. Doña Helena wasn't saying this to make them feel guilty, but to show them that her life had moved forward in a positive way. She hadn't been stuck, nor dependent on their absence. She had grown and flourished. With tears in his eyes, one of the children took his mother's hand. "I'm sorry, Mom. We shouldn't have stayed away for so long." She squeezed his hand lovingly and replied, "Life is full of choices, my children. And I chose to forgive and make the most of every day I have. The important thing is that we're here now. We still have time to make up for what we've lost." And with those words, the reunion, despite being tinged with the sadness of the time that had passed, also brought a sense of renewal. They realized that Doña Helena didn't need to be rescued from anything. She had already rescued herself. The children, sitting next to their mother, were still processing the words she had shared. Each phrase seemed to uncover a new layer of reflections on the decisions they had made in recent years. They, who once saw life as a web of unavoidable commitments, now faced a simple yet profound truth. The mother they had once viewed as fragile and vulnerable was actually a woman of strength and resilience, who had found her own happiness while they were busy with their own routines. It was impossible not to feel a pang of sadness, not just for the prolonged absence, but also for the realization that, at some point, they had stopped seeing their mother as the complete and independent person she had always been. For years, Doña Helena had been the foundation of the family, always available, always present. And when the time came for them to return that love, they had failed. Yet there she was, stronger than ever, proving that even in the face of abandonment, she had found a new purpose, a new way of living. As their mother spoke calmly about her achievements and daily life in the nursing home, the children couldn't help but feel a mix of guilt and admiration. How had they not noticed it before? How had they allowed 3 years to pass without truly being present? The silence that reigned between them at that moment was filled with thoughts and emotions, and the inevitable reflection settled into each of them. While I was busy with work, thinking I was doing the best for my family, I neglected the person who supported me the most throughout my life, thought the eldest daughter, with a lump in her throat. She knew her priorities were out of alignment. Professional success, personal goals, everything seemed to have eclipsed what really mattered, the connection with the one who loved her unconditionally. The other siblings shared the same sentiment. Life, which always seemed full of urgencies, suddenly felt empty compared to the value of being present for those who loved them. They realized that while their mother had found her own strength and begun anew, they had missed the opportunity to be by her side, to accompany that growth, and to share important moments. "I'm sorry, Mom," one of them said, voice breaking with emotion. "We were wrong, but I promise that's going to change." Doña Helena smiled, a smile full of tenderness. "What matters is that you're here now," she responded, with the calm of someone who had grasped the true meaning of life. "We still have time." And it was at that moment, with teary eyes and open hearts, that an emotional reconciliation occurred. It wasn't just a physical reunion, but a new promise. They wouldn't let time slip through their fingers again. The visits would become more frequent, and the relationship with their mother would be rebuilt, this time with the attention and affection she had always deserved. After the reunion, something changed in the dynamic between Doña Helena and her children. The visits, once scarce and heavy with guilt, became moments eagerly anticipated by everyone. Every week, one of the children would show up at the nursing home, bringing not just their physical presence, but also a sincere desire to reconnect. They no longer came out of obligation, but with a renewed desire to be close to their mother and make up for lost time. Each meeting was filled with long and deep conversations. They laughed together, recalling childhood stories, forgotten moments that, when retold, took on new colors and meanings. Doña Helena remembered details from when they were little, of family adventures they had experienced, and the children, now adults, looked at those memories with a new appreciation. What once seemed routine was now seen as a treasure. The moments of affection that had been rare for so long also returned. Prolonged hugs, kisses on the forehead, and words of love became common. Doña Helena, who had initially worried about the emotional distance between her and her children, now felt genuine joy with each visit. It was as if every reunion was a gift, a new opportunity to strengthen the family ties that had been neglected. More than just rebuilding the bond, they rediscovered the pleasure of sharing everyday life. The children, once always rushed and distant, now sat for hours next to their mother, talking about their days, listening to her opinions, and asking for advice. Each visit brought something new to share, a story to tell, and that exchange of experiences brought a lightness and intimacy they hadn't felt in years. For her part, Doña Helena embraced each meeting with a heart full of gratitude. She knew that the time lost in the past couldn't be recovered, but she also understood that the present was even more valuable. Each visit from her children made her feel closer to them, more connected to the family she had always loved. And contrary to what she had imagined, she realized that it was never too late to reunite the bonds and live precious moments together. With time, the frequent visits to Doña Helena began to provoke profound changes in her children. With every visit to the nursing home, as they saw their mother blossom in an environment that had initially seemed so challenging, they realized something that had previously gone unnoticed. Doña Helena, despite all the adversities, had found a way to be happy. She, who had once seemed fragile and dependent, had reinvented herself, finding joy in the little things and rebuilding her life with strength and resilience. This made them reflect on their own routines, their choices, and the frantic pace they had been following without question. Each of the children, in their own way, began to realize that while they were too busy with work, responsibilities, and an endless list of commitments, they had neglected what really mattered. Professional achievements, deadlines, and goals, which once seemed the center of their lives, began to lose a bit of their urgency. They saw in their mother a clear example that life isn't just made up of material accomplishments, but also of moments of connection, love, and true presence. That reconnection with Doña Helena brought a new perspective. Inspired by the way she had transformed her life in the nursing home, they began to question their own routines. They realized that they were always rushing, always postponing the important things for tomorrow, and that had created a distance not only with their mother, but also with other valuable people and moments in their lives. Determined to change, the children began to adjust their priorities. They reevaluated their busy schedules and learned to make space for what truly mattered. Now, instead of feeling obligated to visit their mother out of duty, they felt a genuine desire to be with her, and that change in attitude extended to other areas of their lives. Time with family became just as important as any work meeting, and moments of pause, rest, and reflection became part of their routines. They started dedicating more time to their children, to their spouses, and to the small things that once seemed insignificant but now held immense value. For the first time in years, they felt the impact of a healthy balance between professional and personal life. Professional achievements remained important, but now they were accompanied by a new vision of life, one that made room for affection, quality time, and shared love. For Doña Helena's children, their mother's story of overcoming wasn't just an example of strength and resilience, it was also a silent invitation for them to transform their own lives, seeking a balance that once seemed impossible. They realized that, just like their mother, they were also capable of changing their priorities and living more fully, valuing the present and those they loved. As the years passed, the bonds between Doña Helena and her children strengthened in ways she had never imagined. Those days of distance and sadness were left behind, and in their place emerged a renewed relationship, marked by reconciliation, love, and the appreciation of shared time. Doña Helena felt fully fulfilled, not only for having overcome the challenges of loneliness, but for leaving a powerful emotional legacy for her children. The value of being present, of persisting in love, and of never giving up on relationships, no matter how difficult they may seem. With every visit from her children, every hug, and every conversation, Doña Helena knew that the effort to keep that connection alive had been worth it. She saw in her children a new understanding of life, a change in priorities that made them more human, closer to themselves and to those they loved. She felt grateful for having had the opportunity to show them, not just with words, but with actions, the true meaning of reconciling with the past and living the present fully. At the nursing home, Doña Helena continued to be an inspiring presence. Even in her final years, she never stopped leading the residents in activities, in conversations, and in moments of shared joy. She organized gatherings, helped welcome new residents, and always found ways to make the days there lighter and more meaningful. The friends she made at the nursing home became her second family, and she, in turn, became a figure of respect and admiration for all. When the inevitable end came, Doña Helena departed surrounded by love. Her children were by her side, holding her hands and reaffirming what she already knew, that the love they had rediscovered, the connection they had rebuilt, would stay with them forever. Additionally, her friends from the nursing home, those who had walked with her in her final years, were also there, offering her affection and gratitude for everything she represented. Doña Helena did not leave this world as a lonely or forgotten woman. On the contrary, her life was marked by resilience and reconciliation, by moments of joy and true presence. She left a legacy that her children would carry forward, the most precious of lessons: to live in the present with intensity, to care for those we love, and never to underestimate the power of reconciliation and affection. She passed away in peace, knowing that she had planted seeds of love and understanding that would bloom for generations. The moral of this story is that it is never too late to start anew and to value the people we love. Lost time cannot be regained, but the present offers the opportunity for reconciliation, love, and renewal. True happiness does not reside in material possessions, but in human connections, in affection, and in the presence of those who matter to us.